Linscott's Uhuru and the Renaissance, a summary of Gregg Linscott's book presented by David Hartful of Black Leader Analysis. Gregg Linscott was the co-author of 1991's The Crucible, Forging South Africa's Future. He learned of spiral dynamics through Don Beck. Linscott wrote Uhuru and the Renaissance in 2001 as an update on what was happening in South Africa since the installation of democracy in 1994. Much had changed in South Africa since the installation of democracy. At the same time, much had stayed the same. As blacks began to assume power, their fortune did not translate into mass uplift. Linscott explains how spiral dynamics gave him a new philosophy to understand Africa. Before finding Beck's work, he heard many racist people describe all the problems and successes of Africa using racial stereotypes. He knew these analyses were wrong, yet he saw evidence to support the stereotypes in the world. Spiral dynamics provides a method to move away from stereotypes while framing problems realistically. In reality, South Africa is far more complicated than black and white. There are many value groups in South Africa. Values are a far more productive way to evaluate than race, as values have more of an influence on decision making than skin color. Value evaluation can also facilitate cross-cultural bridging as people realize that members of other races have similarities. The realization of values being more important than race doesn't mean that members of the same race do not act similar. Just the similarities are due to background, beliefs, and not biology. The stages as presented in Linscott's book. A.N. Beige. Linscott uses the terminology of both Graves and Beck in his book. Like both his predecessors, he characterizes this meme as focused on fulfilling periodic needs. Beige meme manifests in present-day South Africa in Sam Bushman and vagrants. Most people in this meme are not functional in society. The book does not spend ample time discussing the meme because few people are in it. B.O. Purple. B.O. Purple has a tribal society in which chiefs and elders rule. The meme is designed to provide for non-periodic needs for safety and community. The tribal order of Africa has survived many attempts to destroy it. It is a fundamental part of South African society. The purple meme has ultimately been a positive source in African society. It provided structure based on community ownership. Transitioning from purple to the next meme, red, has caused many problems. As people lose the communal structure, they face a hostile world alone. The transition causes acting out in an aggressive and antisocial manner. C.P. Red. Assertive, rugged individualism characterizes Red meme. The meme is amoral and centered around domination through physical strength. Those in charge of society are the strongest. In medieval Europe, barbarian warlords served this function. Modern-day South Africa has crime bosses. Both control through strength. The positive expression would be in sports stars, especially those that come from underprivileged backgrounds. In America, the Irish asserted themselves as boxers to be followed by African Americans later in the century. Both communities used these stars to build pride and release aggression vicariously. Many people revert to red from a failed blue meme. In the book, Linscott speaks of Afrikaners that regressed into riot in 1914 as a response to perceived oppression from the British. Also, many Afrikaners spied for Germany in World War II. The Black Arms struggle was also framed in a similar regressive light in response to Afrikaner oppression. DQ Blue. Order and tradition characterize the DQ Blue meme. Most of the world's great religions are part of this meme. Philosophies in the blue meme believe they are the sole repository of all truth. Everyone must succumb to the orthodoxy according to the blue meme. In South African politics, nationalism is the expression of the blue meme. Initially, the Union Party of South Africa expressed a transcontinental version of English nationalism. In response, the Afrikaner created their nationalism. The culmination of Afrikaner nationalism was apartheid. In response to that, Africans created a nationalism based on vague Marxism. The idea that one culture should rule over others is common in these movements. Another example of the memes crossing racial barriers is the Christianized Kolwa people. The Kolwa were a clan of the Zulus that converted to Christianity. The Kolwa spoke Zulu, however, all other aspects of their culture were Victorian. They wore top hats, studied theology, and thumbed their nose at those with loose romantic relationships in the Zulu tribe. Orange. Meeting needs through rationale and finesse characterize the orange meme. The orange meme has propelled humankind forward from superstition and rigidity. People from this meme can achieve goals while working within the narrow boundaries of the law. In South African politics, the orange meme was represented by the National Party pragmatists. The pragmatists knew that they would have to make concessions to other groups in the constitutional negotiations. There were African National Congress and Inkatha that thought along the same lines. Even though the pragmatists were rooted in separate nationalism, they could work together to avoid chaos in South Africa. FS Green Meme. FS Green Meme uses adaptive intelligence to build an equitable society. People in the Green Meme support the welfare state, anti-war movement, and other left-wing ideologies. Most of the people in this wing were wealthy because of their parents' success in the orange meme. They attempt to help and identify with poor and working class from a distant vantage point. Their programs often fail because of lack of understanding of the root of the social problem. Examples in South African politics are Institute of Race Relations, Black SAS, and the Progressive Party. The book did not go into detail about how these organizations manifest these memes. Second tier. The second tier is comprised of the yellow and turquoise meme. Flexibility and respect for all memes characterize the yellow meme. Yellow does not attack or try to destroy other memes. Higher order holistic thinking describes turquoise. These are the memes members of government should aspire to. Since few people were at this meme at the time of the book does not go into much detail on them. South Africa's problems and solutions. Colonialism framed using spiral dynamics. At the time of colonization, the natives of Africa were at an ANBO level. There were a few empires like the Zulu and Ashanti that were at the CP level. Ultimately, European guns overpowered the empires and took over Africa. When the colonists took over, they decided to incorporate the BO tribes. The tribal leaders would rule by proxy for the crown. African leaders were eventually able to overthrow the colonial powers. These leaders were at a CP level. When the leaders installed democracy, they needed to get popular support. They partnered with tribal leaders to accomplish this goal, building a political system similar to the colonial structure. There were intellectuals at the ER level that saw this happening. They were too few to resist. The new power structure incorporated many of these scholars. To improve the situation in Africa, the population needs to move to a DQ blue, ER orange level. Crime. Most criminals in distance are centered in the red meme, according to Claire Graves' research. To stop crime, these people need to be encouraged to move to the blue meme. Many dissidents want to move to blue. When members of the Pan-African Congress were asked to make a list of demands, one of their demands was to join the national service as white children did. To enable the dissidents to enter the national service was not unprecedented. Disenfranchised Afrikaner youth comprised the Special Service Battalion of the 1930s. The Special Service Battalion fought with distinction in World War II. The ANC policy of ungovernability exacerbated the crime problem. The plan was imposed to combat apartheid. The idea was the citizenry would be encouraged to be unruly to force the government to spend resources to keep the peace. The government would eventually crumble under the weight of trying to keep the peace. Unfortunately, people encouraged to be unruly did not change at the drop of a dime. Now South African society needs to reintegrate these people. Linscott recommends building a jobs training camp that train children to work on infrastructure projects. These training camps will build blooming values of hard work and dependability. The work will be physically demanding, which will allow the children to expend energy normally used to act out in an antisocial manner. The police must also be committed more to law and order than personal political beliefs. That will facilitate people's movement from red to blue. Many of the police see the criminals as victims of apartheid. These offenders very well could be victims of apartheid, yet the police need to focus only on keeping order. In the same vein, lenient sentencing policies from the judicial system will be viewed by criminals as weakness. Firm boundaries need to be created for those in the red meme, as they recognize strength as authority. Economics. South Africa has the monumental task of building a post-colonial economy. Unemployment is rampant and ranges from 30 to 60%. Even when the economy grows, only 3% of the matriculate will get a job. Many of these systems and employment structures were not created to include black people. Two competing issues are challenging to address together: the inclusion and development of black talent while keeping qualified, competent professionals already in the workforce. Currently, many black applicants leave the country or move away from rural areas. Linscott estimates around 100,000 skilled professionals leave South Africa every month. The brain drain has a detrimental effect on education and law enforcement, as talented veterans cannot train recruits. At the same time, there needs to be an effective effort to incorporate and develop black talent. Black economic empowerment was established to allow blacks to enter all stages of business and to be included in ownership. BBE needs to be developed into something more nuanced that can accommodate talent from all races. Rural areas need serious development. Where lack of infrastructure prevents business development, a government infrastructure plan developed with help of locals will create an environment more suited for business development. Working with locals will not only make them invested in the success of the project, but ensure correct prioritization of milestones. HIV prevention. Linscott explains that ever since the turn of the centuries, workers moved from tribal areas to urban centers. The move caused the workers to lose their tribal values at the BO level. The quest for instant gratification without regard to moral code characterized the move to CP Red. Many of the workers took wives in the city and the rural townships. As CP Red values progressed, more antisocial behaviors propagated. Promiscuity became common, along with rape and prostitution. When HIV/AIDS came, it spread like wildfire. As of the publishing of the book, 13.5% or 4.2 million South Africans were infected. A move to DQ blooming values is the obvious solution when using spiral dynamics. The need of propagating responsible sexual behavior far outweighs the propagation of drugs or prophylactics. BO purple values are also needed. Virginity testing, even though repugnant to modern moral and equality standards, could be useful. Conclusion. Linscott understands not only the need to move to the highest levels of the spiral, but the need to propagate positive expressions of each meme. The general population needs to have a new DQ blue meme that does not have the baggage of colonialism. Also, those at the highest level of the spiral need to be recognized and put in charge. The proper understanding of spiral will facilitate a society that works for everyone. Spiral dynamics will also assist people moving from analysis on race to move to analysis towards values. Thank you for watching. For more information, visit my WordPress site, www.blackleaderanalysis.com. And if you found this Presentation helpful. Donate through PayPal, sdnrace@gmail.com.